Your book is entitled Afrobeat, Fela and the Imagined Continent.
That's right.
Africa is the imagined continent?
Precisely. The sense of, I didn't want to call it Africa so that it can also have what you call that poetic flair, an imagined continent. The name can even change, anything can change, but he imagined a continent of the kinds of things that he said, the kinds of things that he read, the kinds of things that he published, not just through records, but also through his writings in his magazines and his newspaper. Don't forget that he also had things like Yap News, which he published periodically, in those days. And he gave lectures across campuses in this country and abroad.
Was Fela an intellectual?
He was a public intellectual, obviously. He was a public intellectual, obviously.
What was his imagination of Africa?
Okay, basically, Fela imagined Africa largely as his dream of a future's Africa was one in which its people will be united along a common purpose, and its people will have a sense of development that will not be harmful to its citizenry. Its people will have some kind of lease of life. But what I noticed, that Fela tried as much as possible to get out of a racial definition of Africa, but not quite successfully. But he now and again resorts to blackness and all that. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a limitation, but I would say those were his preferences. But now and again, he will step out of it. I talk of Nasser, Abdul Nasser, and we'll talk about the leaders of Sudan and all of those progressive, Bembela in Algeria, and on and on and on and on. Those will happen, but largely he had the ethnic sense of Africa, to a large extent. But whatever it is, he wanted a united Africa.
You said here, Fela's imagined universe, of which Africa was its epicenter, takes off from an idyllic Renaissance Africa with a scribal culture. Can you break that down?
Yeah, many scholars will come and say Africa has no writing. It was largely oralist and all that, but it's not nothing can be further than the truth. This is actually mankind's home of the earliest writing. Discovered by everybody so far. We know of all the experience of ancient Egypt, and people don't actually understand. They see these things within the prism of maybe 20 years or 30 years. People don't understand migratory patterns, that sometimes you find names in Igbo land and you go to Malawi, you find the same name. Or earlier, so people have moved off and on, But largely, this was an Egypt without the Arabs. So it's important to first get that. This was an Egypt without the Romans, without the Greeks. This was basically an Egypt of black people, along with their lighter cousins like the Berbers and the rest. We knew when the Arabs crossed the Arabian Peninsula and got here. So that's not even a debate. Even people, when you go to Egypt, will tell you, and I was speaking with a couple of years back, I've forgotten Baba's name now, the director of Afro-Asian Center in Cairo, and he was quite clear about this, that the whole issue of Arab Egypt is a much more recent. Now, before all of these people came, we had all of those writings. Now, the interesting thing, so in the manner, now there's no way you could claim that people who had this civilization and say they are inferior. So in order to enslave them. So what you then did was to say they are not the creators of this. But you know the interesting thing. Now, even if you claim that Egypt is not an African invention, some people came from Mars or from the moon, and created all the writings. How about the fact that the larger number of pyramids are actually not even in Egypt, they are in Sudan, even as we speak? So anyway, we don't even have to go to...
Fela knew all this.
Oh, he knew all of these things.
He studied hard.
Well, he studied, on literature of this nature, yes. He studied really hard on matters like this.
You said Fela protested against conventional attitude to education, gender, technology, power, life, and death. Was that what made him an anarchist?
It wasn't. An anarchist is, in my opinion, somebody who doesn't believe in some kind of, in the layman's understanding, that doesn't subscribe to governance principles. In the first place, he had a house, he had a family, he had a large family, he had a band. I mean, so
he was not an anarchist.
He wasn't. And then he believed in certain, and he read and wrote and spoke about it. He spoke about a future Africa, of a governance style. That's not anarchy. But we need anarchy as a philosophical principle to check ourselves. Anarchy poses radical questions about the rigidity of forms. So anarchy in itself is not necessarily negative. Depends on how it is used. So every society needs the anarchist perspective. De-hierarchization. When you say this is hierarchy, to de-hierarchize it, you say this is sort of, to find ways of reinvention, to say you want to deconstruct a thing, as people will say in the academia. I mean, that is to take a radical, different perspective of looking at it, either totally differently. So I think
that's anarchism.
No, I mean, I'm saying it has the capacity.
Okay.
Yeah, anarchy has the capacity to do that, and it helps mankind. Because it took somebody to appear like an anarchist for us to know that the earth is not flat, that it's not even round, but that today it is geoid. Okay? Now, it took a long while. I will know how much some of our forebears in research and scholarship, did in order to bring us to this level. They were killed, you remember, men and women who dared to say all of these things. They even accused them. In fact, remember one of the things for which even Socrates was accused of is that he was listening too much. Those who said that the earth was suspended by air, and I think they were talking of planetary system of that sort. They thought it was flat and the rest of it, But beyond that, several people, in different communities. Yeah.
So how would you describe Kalakuta Republic? It wasn't conventional.
Okay, fine.
Was Kalakuta Republic not a rejection of the state in its present state?
Kalakuta was many things, and that's also, I'll agree, part of it. As envisaged by Fela, again, he had his dream of certain kinds of society. He created a micro African cosmopolis in which he allowed people with different ideas to come. And in Kalakuta Republic, you had people from different origins, different spaces, different age background, and different temperament. But again, there were rules and there was order. And within Kalakuta Republic, for instance, when Fela was rehearsing, it was easy for him. He had a ready dictionary. He needed references. For instance, in trying to stress the fact that we have a toilet system in Africa, All the names that Fela referenced there, you could almost find the people there. For Hausa land, Saluga; for Igbo land, Gunichi; Bemba land, Gunichi or something; for this old land, Ibuchi. Long time ago, long time ago, African people, they carry shit with the shit inside people, So those kinds of things. So this was the micro African cosmopolitan that gave Fela the ease for the same kind of Pan-African referentiality that he was making. He lived it. Now, he also considered it as a safe space for everybody, right? Everybody's running away from institutions of containment.
That's what you call alternative living.
Yeah. Church new, mosque new, family new, marriage new, all institutions with the capacity of containment, school new, curriculum and all that, those things that are dangerous were thrown out. You could come there. Nobody would say, "Oh, Shola, you are thrown out. What are you doing here?" I mean, once you conducted yourself and you behaved properly, and so nobody challenged that. So it was a space for all running from the institutions of containment. Yeah.
So did Fela create a state inside the state?
Melodramatically, yes.
And at some point, the state went to destroy Fela's state.
Yeah, they needed to destroy Kalakuta Republic. I mean, he did not just create a compound. He described it as a republic, and dared to live fairly alternately from the. So in a way, it was challenging the dream of the state. Whereas the state preached the imposition of religion by practice, not necessarily as it was enshrined in the Constitution, but I showed that you are free to worship there. Where the state prescribed, its own sense of marital, convention. Fela said was married 27 wives, and all that. Now, the question is not whether that is supported by me or not. That's Fela's choice. I have no intention to marry 27 wives, and I don't even know how a human being can do that. But we're analyzing that Fela was posing a challenge, using his life to show a challenge to the state. And I think the state felt, this is scary. So, as a corrupter of youth, the same accusation against Elinkwe in the ancient Oyo kingdom and Mr. Socrates in their own community also, it was bound to be stopped, So the state came and assaulted and did all, and eventually they killed him. I mean, it was too much. The assault on that gentleman was too much.
And the mother was there that day.
Oh well, that was
1977.
That was the day he died, of course, as we all remember. But from then on, but even before then, the 70s, all the brutalization through the IG then, Adeusi, who is from Oyo State here, and Force CID and all of the different people and all. Those are highly documented in the literature of that period.
Is that why you said Fela's music, Afrobeat, was beyond rhythm? They aimed at cultural and political action.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Don't forget that even when you came, Fela insisted that my music is not just for you to dance, but it's like cultural action for freedom. So in a way, it's a fusion of cultural action and aesthetic possibilities. And interestingly, Afrobeat won't be this interesting. That is Fela's Afrobeat without
Fela's
an S.
Afrobeat.
Yeah, without an S. If he was just sloganizing, but because he brought a very interesting and complex musical, practice, which amalgamated several traditions of music. Underlaid by, diverse African rhythmic system. He fused what we had and what was taken and improvised out there like jazz. And he brought it back and funk, readapted it to the cultural environment and created. Of course, he didn't like the name Afrobeat. When, in fact, he told me that this was just a useless commercial devised by recording labels to sell. I mean, that's what he said to me.
So what did he prefer?
Well, what was it he was talking about then? Say African classical music. African classical music. But you know the way these things go in history, recording labels, a commercial, the public sometimes give you a name. But I think what's more important is the content and quality of what he brought into Afrobeat, no matter what it's called. And it's something that we'll keep studying and studying and studying. And it's not a surprise that, unfortunately, it's difficult to play Afrobeat. You can learn the technicality, but the multi-parts and the rather complex manner of structuring his music is, except you start being deliberate and teaching it in music school, the way you're teaching jazz, the way you're teaching blues, so that people can go and earn PhD in Afrobeat. PhD Afrobeat, so that you can. Tony Allen is another aspect. The drumming system of Afrobeat and its development over the period, how it deals with time, signature, and etc., etc. From track to track, it's a totally different thing. Or is it the aspect of its call and response? Sometimes when you have leader call and the chorus, leader call and instrumentalist, leader call and the entire song versus the audience, and multiple layer of solos going on or in unison. It's something I have never in my life. It's a hypertextual event, emanation of the ancient ritual on stage. Several multimodal things you can see, you can hear, you can taste, everything going on. It was heavy. It was heavy. It was heavy.
We are discussing Africa through the eye of this book, Afrobeat, Fela, and the Imagined Continent. Look at the book. It's a book you should read. I'm recommending this book to you. Written by Sola Olorunyomi, Afrobeat, Fela, and the Imagined Continent. Sola Olorunyomi is a professor at the Institute of African Studies. In fact, he is the director of the institute. You interviewed Fela in the course of researching for this work, right?
Yes.
Who was the Fela you interviewed?
Okay, well, basically on the research itself, the interview was significant, but maybe it's the totality of the observation. So I conducted ethnography, not necessarily for this book. Initially, I conducted the ethnography with the hope of writing a biography, which meant Fela was one important part, but also the entirety. So that meant I was interviewing members of the band. I was interviewing people who were at the gate. I was interviewing bouncers. I was interviewing dancers and individual instrumentalists, drummers, and all that. And that meant by the time I started, some were already leaving, so it was in the same space. So Tony Allen, for instance, I had to get him in France and in Britain. One of Fela's friends, I had to get in France. Another person I had to get in Denmark, Gudrun. Gudrun fainted. I remember Gudrun.
Why did he faint?
I don't know. She said Fela was speaking to her. I was scared. She just stopped, and I couldn't touch her for fear that my fingerprints, this African man comes, meets this Caucasian girl, and then she dies in her room. And then it was about 2 minutes. It seemed like 7 years. Then she came back. I said, what was that? She said we should continue the interview. And I said, what was that? She said, Fela was speaking to her. Well, so about 10 minutes after I left, I was a bit heavy, so. So I've been meeting a lot of the Fela people who are quite exciting.
Because at some point you were talking about the codification of Afrobeat practice. You were looking at the canonization of Fela. It's like deifying Fela.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to deify him. He's already codified and canonized, and he's already an ancestor, an Orisha. It was actually before he died. He represented the Orisha performance and total performance, just not music. The ambience, mise en scène, kind of costume, of lightning, of all of those things that you found on stage. Is it by coincidence that even when the young people call what they play now Afrobeats, they still sample Fela, they reference Fela, they do a lot of things with the entire Fela corpus in different ways as extension. It is by coincidence that all musical practice all over the world. And the reason was that for some reason Fela was wise enough or properly guided spiritually, and when I use that, I don't use spiritually in any abstract way to mystify the word. I mean an internal conviction that will come from serendipity. Your mind just tells you something. He refused to go along the sense of commercial superstars. For instance, he will not go and do the regular thing. You go to studio and you do a musical video. He refused to comply with the rules of shortened time. He played what he wanted to play. He exhibited it. And it was as if he knew that society. And he refused to sell his rights. And that was the biggest thing. Because there was a time, I think it was like this third largest filmmaking, they came at some point when they were trying to do a movie. I've forgotten. Not Warner Brothers, not... Anyway, so they came and they were going to, I think, about $10 million then. And it seemed like big money. They refused. Even though he needed the money, So it's there for use now. It's there for his, estate. And you can see how they're quite free on how young people are using it. And it's taking over the continent, and it's also conquering other parts of the world. And this will go on for a long time. It's not the kind of thing that you go and say it's gone. They will always have to reference it. It has come to stay like jazz, like blues. It has come to stay like highlife.
Why was he so concerned about replacing the old ancestors with new ancestors like Kwame Nkrumah?
Oh, yeah.
Marcus Garvey.
Yeah.
What was it about the new ancestors that thrilled him?
The interesting thing is, at the back of the shrine, you'll find the ancient ancestors there. You'll find Shango, you find Ogun, you have Chiwota. Yeah, it's a female godhead from Mali. You find, but Fela also understood the a process of canonization into ancestorhood. I mean, this is how saints are created in other culture, okay? You know, people who have done well, who have excelled in investigating issues of lightning related to electrical charges. So they end up being canonized as Shango. People who have done much about, you know, iron, metal, you know, and all that. The whole process of forging and all that.
Did he pay obeisance to these old ancestors?
He did.
He believed in Songo?
Yeah, I mean, he paid. I mean, some of the songs I know were Great Mija, Parara, Great Moja, Ye, we greet you, Goddess, Great Moja, Goddess of our water, we greet you, Goddess, Great Moja. There was also one for Ogun. We greet you, oh great God, Ogun. We greet you, oh great God, Ogun. You are the one who be the enemy of oppression. You are the one. We be the enemy of all these oppressors. We greet you. We greet you, great God. Ogun. Towards the end. By this time, he was returning to high life, where I started from.
From the Kulalu beat.
Yeah, you could see those kinds of, you know, and all that. And you could hear those kinds of songs during Easter at the Eleko beach in those days, when you went. And then, I remember when he was singing those great Moja, people would look, usually it would be the evening, and you know, the kind of crest and trough of, you know, the ocean. And people would allude and say, hey, you can see, the ocean is responding to Fela. You know, it was those kinds of dynamic audience reaction that I found quite fascinating.
You know, you used the word worship while we were talking about Kalakuta. Was Ogun and Shango represented in Kalakuta?
Ogun was in Kalakuta, Shango was there. I mean, things got added now and again. But like new ancestors you're talking about, yes, those who have fought for Africa were there. Malcolm X was there. Nkrumah was there. Lumumba was there. And then Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti also joined, was consistently there. And it's understandable.
No ancestor from Nigeria except Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti?
The others are from, many of them were from Nigeria. West Africa, Shango, across West Africa.
And I mean, if Nkrumah was represented,
yeah,
Patrice Lumumba was represented.
Yeah.
Why was Awolowo absent?
No, there was no way. There was absolutely no way Awolowo, Zik, or, in Fela's opinion, they weren't Pan-African enough. Zik started as a Pan-African, Pan-Africanist, but receded into traditional agreement with Western IMF traditions of doing things. Those ones won't. It doesn't mean they're not great leaders, but it won't fit into his own sense of the pantheon. Yeah. Yes, Awolowo did feel what's called free education, great things. It was also done in the East, and in the North, a lot of manpower was at some point taken abroad for training. It's not as if the leaders didn't do anything in that sense, but this was not. But I thought it was not enough.
In the book, you talked about his preference for the continental ancestor to ethnic ancestor. I was wondering what you were talking about.
Yeah, by and large, whatever you do, he measured them only within the context, and that's why it's a bit sad that what happened in the Nigerian story, it turned out the manner in which it turned out for Zik, because he preferred, you could see, he strove rather to the continental ancestor. If he chose Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, it was more because Funmilayo was Pan-African. if she was just localized, it didn't matter whether she was the mother or not, that she wouldn't have entered the pantheon. Lumumba did not just stand for Congo. He stood for Africa. Nkrumah stood for Africa. Bembela stood for Africa. So those were the kinds of things. Nasser in Egypt stood for Africa. Those are the kinds of things that Fela wanted.
You said Fela also relates the idea of being African to the idea of the original or early man who is free, unencumbered by conventions and apparatuses of containment.
Yeah, Fela fantasizes, as all artists do, a great deal. These are not things I'm imposing. That section of the book I took from his lecture tours across Nigerian campuses and public spaces as a public intellectual that he was. I took from his records, I took from interviews, in order to, that entire section I call it philosophy, in order to have a sense of what is it that he really represented. Yeah, Fela was just based on his reading. He knew that Africa was the home of our species, isn't it? Africa is the origin of the human species. That's what he was referring to. And of course, the early man, was more, became a folk became a folk with all the features of folk life, which was a lot simpler. So he fantasized that, and unencumbered by too much of conventions. Of course, it had its own convention too, but it was a dream. It was an idea. So he made it rather idyllic, in my opinion. But once he defined it in such terms, he tried to say as far as it could go, and as far as national and state authorities could allow his expansion of this sense of freedom. He fantasized about such things because he referenced them.
You see, I am thinking that Fela is an anarchist.
How do you mean?
You have defined anarchism for us.
By Proudhon or Bukharin, which of them? What was the definition there?
Let's use this context. I want to read from your book. You said, this interventionist stance is often realized in his lyrical discourse as the troubadour and quester for truth. It usually comes off as me, Fela, I challenge, as we find in army arrangement. Apparently having frequently succeeded in a lumpen mode of advocacy, he elevated the form into a theory of living. Now this is the point I want to drive at. You said in spite of his forays in political group organizational efforts, however, Fela is essentially, in a strict Bakuninian sense, an anarchist.
Okay, fine. That's right.
Uh-huh.
I was very specific.
Uh-huh.
Bakunin also has his own definition.
Okay.
Bakunin was an old Russian activist of anarchy. And so I'm saying that if we use the model of Bakunin, you say, fine. Fela is also an anarchist. And in my own sense, I said, anarchy itself is needed in society to some degree. But society cannot be run by anarchy. Yeah, okay, fine. Because you need presence, you need governance, you need structures that we can keep doubting it. So the anarchist helps us to re-examine our sometimes certitudes of infancy. I mean, you have believed something for so long, and you believe things as a child, and you believed it, I mean, I kept saying, for instance, that I had slapped a lion, and everybody agreed with me because they thought, okay, this was a child of, in those days, some elite, until the teacher said, that's nonsense, it's not possible. Was it in a zoo? And I said, no, I said it was just passing by. And it didn't occur to me, then I recalled, I felt hot because everybody laughed in class. And then it occurred to me, it was just a little calf that was going by the house in Zaria.
That you slapped?
I just, no, just a little pap, and it just ran away and all that. For some reason, it came as a lion. And as a child, I was saying, so I had certitude about that. I could have killed if I grew up and nobody jacked me off. So anarchy needs to jack you off sometimes. I will say we must do three-piece suit. Why must we? Everybody must have one wife. Why? Just the why. Just explain why. Children should not see, women should not why. Just why.
How would you explain Fela snatching the helmet of a rude policeman?
No, Fela, Fela he had a lot of rascality. That's rascality, sheer rascality.
How would you explain Fela using a new Mercedes-Benz, riding roughshod on the streets of Lagos? Look at how you described it. A Mercedes-Benz fixed with a carriage to convey fear in order to trivialize a symbol of elitism.
Yeah, precisely, that was what it was. I mean, I'll call it really a hyperbolic, rather over dramatized sense of because that's quite expensive, isn't it? That's quite, but he had so much money then also, I mean, that's just a Fela thing. It's a Fela person that does that.
When you talk about Fela, this question of Nigerian natural grass comes up. He didn't want to use the word Indian hemp.
Yeah, and Fela has a lot of pun, don't forget, a lot of jokes. So rather than marijuana like hemp or Indian hemp or whatever, he said this is not Indian. And when you say hemp, it's called it's grass. You can use it to cook. This NNG. So in order to spoof Nigeria natural gas, you can say Nigeria natural grass. So it's full of those kinds of puns, looking for acronyms. So he would do beast of no nation in order to achieve the word born in Berlin. And those places where what is his name now? In the 19th century, Ottoman bomb, Bismarck and all that were doing a lot of, the division of Africa, etc., etc. Or just born as a place where a name of an imperial nation. He would do things like that. What do you call it? BBC. Again, big blind country. So when he does NNG, it's in that tradition of the performative side of Fela, a lot of jokes, even while doing serious things.
The smoking of marijuana was a tradition within Kalakuta and the Shrine. And that also attracted a lot of anger from some persons and the government. And I wonder why he insisted in that kind of lifestyle. Did you ask him?
No, I didn't ask him because it was. I don't think it was necessary. I think researchers should do more work on marijuana. That's what I would say. Because you see, as a scholar, I have to be careful. I know all the whole thing is. It doesn't make you mad in the first place. That's nonsense. That's crap. It's if you don't eat well or whatever, you can go mad. Even if all you're doing, and you see them in the streets, marijuana, of course. The first thing, if you take it, I took it in secondary school. I was very hungry, and somebody had to bring me gari and I had to take a lot. And at the point, the ceiling was compressing on me. Goodness God. I was floating on, like in a spatial spiritual dimension. I didn't understand. Okay, that was high school, fine. But moving forward, I didn't have to smoke. I just needed to experiment in high school. But in Kalakuta, I was fairly more experienced as a young. I mean, I was former NANS person. I was student union president. I mean, so this sort of stuff. We're talking work with IMF, World Bank. So we're talking of values, trade values. We're talking free education, possibility of funding. So it's not some kind of neophyte that got to Kalakuta. So I thought that I won't partake in the criminalization. In fact, after Christ said, drop that stone, except you haven't partaken in, and also when you have the evidence of science, those whom we have killed, and yet they are the people who have held mankind, because we didn't understand what they were saying. So what is the problem? Something tells me there might just be something exciting, because people suffering from cancer sometimes, I learned there are certain medication extraction from marijuana. And I'm told also that, in certain contexts, it might be the fact that since it grows in every neighborhood, transnational tobacco companies, this might just be a trade war. Because it was such a terrible thing then in the colonial times to take ogogoro, they called it illicit gin. And then they brought in whiskey. And so one has to be very careful sometimes on these things. So the fear is that people will be, you may be labeled, so it seems like you are taking marijuana and all that. I mean, serious scholars shouldn't be bothered about that. I mean, you should die, in my opinion, or as scholars of old have done, on the basis of, the convictions of knowledge, So it seems to me that there's too much hype on marijuana. In any case, young people are not even taking it, which would have been really preferable. They are taking horrible things. Because the same fella will not allow you to take heroin, cocaine. Those were the things called drugs in the shrine. By the rules of Afrika Shrine and Kalakuta, heroin, all of these terrible things, cocaine, those were the drugs. Marijuana is declassified as Nigerian natural grass. You can use it to cook, you sleep well, sir.
In the shrine.
Even if you cook it, sir.
Fela died. And during his burial, there were some rituals.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. In the early hours, there are just a few of us there. And, obviously the children had gotten there very early, and they had their misgivings as to whether people will come. And they were wondering, wasn't this an error to have agreed to fix it there? Trickles. Long story cut short, the entire Tafawa Balewa Square was filled up. The entire, that's bigger than a stadium. And over 1 million feet marched to pay their last respect. Obviously, not everybody was able to go around the coffin. But given the privilege of smuggling and muzzling myself in, and the kind of research I was doing, it seemed to me, and I explained it elsewhere, that Fela was having his first peaceful sleep.
Yes, you said that in the book.
Yeah, in 58 years, it seemed, He was there calm and all that. But again, in ritual, you shouldn't go alone. So the band leader, Babani, felt that he may require, the marijuana on Heaven's Way.
On Heaven's Way.
Yeah, so they park some and they put on some and some marches. And then he might need to also buy things. So they put 300 naira, tuck it in his pocket, and a couple of things that he will use as part of his journey. And that was it.
You were sure he was going to heaven?
Wherever people go to, they may spend some money or they may need to smoke on the way if they are tired.
That means there's life after death. That's what that represents.
That's the symbolism. I mean, I just make light of it.
And they mentioned Shango.
Yeah.
You even said you Ogboni were in the background.
Oh no, that the Ogboni people came a day earlier.
Okay.
Again, altogether, I don't think we were more than 15. No, I'd already gotten there and all that. That I was very lucky, because if I had not gotten in there, research requires a lot of patience. Because you might wait and wait for an entire day. This as a researcher yourself, and you might miss but we're there and on, and you couldn't be sure in those periods what will happen a day before. What will happen? Was he going to be brought to the shrine the same? Because this was still the same shrine, the old shrine before Family Shrine, the last shrine before the new Afrika Shrine. So, and suddenly they bring him in. It was my moment in life. And well, that happened like it happens sometimes. The camera failed me. But again, there are a few photographs and all that. Even though they said, don't take photographs. And those who were a bit timid didn't. But, my own camera failed, that's all. And my friends say, it's the power of, it wasn't the power of anything. It was just a lousy camera. I mean, in any case, some other cameras picked some things. So at that point, the traditional ritual, fell on, his first son, Femi, to do. And then, of course, when they propitiated the ancestors, Shango, Ogun, Yemoja, Lumumba, Nkrumah, and all that, and of course took the wick and dipped it in the appropriate place and moved back and swelling, a couple of times without having to turn his head. And then he took out of, the calabash to pour libation, sipped it, and then of course gave it to all of us there, and then we all sipped. I was participant observer, so band members and all that. Then I think Chief Dosumu, Chief Dosumu was the head of the Ogboni that day in the Lagos area. He came and then did the ritual and bidded him on a peaceful transition to, it's not called heaven, back to his Egbe, from where we all came. So he returns there.
Was he a member of the Ogboni fraternity?
I'm not sure, but if members of the family were maybe somebody they respected in the family, maybe one of his parents might have been or something of that nature, they could still come.
So Jesus was not mentioned?
Oh, no.
Islam wasn't mentioned? No,
there was no quarrel with Jesus or Islam. They were just enacting Obilo, and it's just, everything in life is ancestor worship. You remember your past one. But these are ancestors worship, of your mother, your late mother, this ancestor worship. We all partake in ancestor worship.
So having looked at that ritual nature of Fela's life, can we interpret his music as spiritual?
I think it was highly spiritual, but I don't know what people say as spiritual. Spiritual in the broader sense is the manner in which things affect you in foundational manner that may make you rethink or may shift a certain kind of consciousness in your mind or may create ambience even when they may not be physically there. I mean, you may be in the sun and then you feel a lot, like you're cold. I mean, it may be based on reflection. It may be based on several things. It depends on how you put your mind to it. Don't forget, everything must also have a community of readiness to accept. Somebody would listen to it and it wouldn't mean anything. But somebody that wants to relate it, to a belief system and all that would derive some things. But whichever one it is, his music can be very calming because there's organization in the music and there's a lot of dimensions. And man is essentially musical, starting with our rhythm, starting with our speech habits and the rest. So we all connect in different ways. Yeah.
Should we still be talking about the African Revolution?
Well, it's not even in the position of anyone to imagine a society without transformation. It's not possible. How the future revolution will come is what we are not very sure of. But it does seem to me that today there's an ascendancy of right-wing globally. In North America, increasingly in Europe, and also in Nigeria and many other African countries, with the exception of little efforts like in the Sahelian states, where they're trying to push back. But for how long they can do that, we don't know. Especially because they are nations with very poor disposable income, or the structures of development and governance. For instance, even Nigeria doesn't have the wherewithal to become an industrialized state, because it doesn't have the industry that can produce other industries. It relies on the second layer of production. So that is not a way to get industrialized at all. So definitely inequality is increasing. The privileges of the elite is getting wider, and the environment is telling. We're having increasingly insufficient rains. Migration issues are coming up. At the same time, small arms are being distributed so liberally. Definitely there will be a pushback at some point by the people. There will be a pushback. There's absolutely nothing anybody can do. But so far, they've invested in religion, in calming the people. And then the chanting, you see on video these days, a woman is going and, what do they call it, social media people, and you pretend that you are a poor man, you try to con or whatever, so that depending if the woman then helps you in a fundamental way, you give her maybe 100,000 or 150. And all of those things are many, like a lottery and other in the West. Unknown to us, these are strategies, because there are sometimes founders of these things. These are strategies, apart from the fact that the people themselves want to be known and they will have more likes, and then of course they will get some payment. But these kinds of strategies will keep us in poverty. No woman should be in those kinds of poverty. No young girl will have to need to suddenly help someone or not, hawk an irresponsible few things on the head, and then you give us money to go back to school. I'm not blaming those children nor the people who giving them. But this is not the solution. It's the abdication of the roles of the state, the promise of even a bourgeois state, capitalist state. At least a child will be educated, at least from the day of birth till maybe what we call GSS 3 or WAEC. So what the hell are they doing around? And you are needing the luck of some person that shows you on social media and all that. So the consciousness being thrown into the Nigerian population is because the state has abandoned its responsibility. Everybody is hoping that they'll meet their own day of luck someday. So you don't know whether the person is even a thief. He comes and does something. You are trying to be good in a way that is not natural with the hope that this person may just have a hidden camera somewhere. No, it's not the way to go.
The reason I asked that question about the possibility of the African Revolution is because of the definition of Fela's music. You said it aims at cultural and political action. So the possibility of the African Revolution, can it be triggered by Fela's music?
It's already triggering it. Every major demonstration, every major protest necessarily, but people are a bit tired for now. But when it picks up, they will still have to resort to this, which is the danger, because the music is going nowhere. It won't run away. Unfortunately, it's on TikTok. Unfortunately, it's on AI. It's new media. Unfortunately, it's in a multimodal presentation globally and globally and globally. It's in the minds of the people. So to this extent, Fela's Afrobeat may not be the revolution, but will definitely crystallize the process through which a revolution will come to this nation.
The first time I laid my hands on this book, the first thing I said, thank you, Olorunyomi, for writing this book.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Who did you write this book for?
The Nigerian audience and the global audience.
Are they reading your book?
Well, I won't know. I tend to get more responses from outside, but I'm deliberately, even though it was initially published in the US, but that's not because I preferred to be published in the US, but they were more initially excited about that. So in New Jersey, AWP started this, and aspects of this have also been published between Oxford and UJ, University of Johannesburg, here and there. But we have it done, reissued in Nigeria twice now. The current one by Knowledge, a major voice that's coming under the published Savio, and it's coming in gradually and gradually. It's the kind of thing that won't go, in my opinion, like Afrobeat, because in the first place, I was mindful that if you want quick sale, you call it a book like Fela had died. You say Fela, people will rush to it. I resisted it. What was more enduring was that he created a form. The publishers, the editors said, I said no. Afrobeat is the issue, so it can be remembered as jazz, as highlife, as juju, not just some African beats, Afro beats. And they were using a very reckless manner. Initially, they put Afro and then beat. I said, no. It's a form. It's Afrobeat, not Afro and hyphen beat. And that took a long time, in the public discourse. Now we're glad it's called Afrobeat, even though Fela doesn't still like the name. But at least it's a form, something you can study in class, something that is having different dimensions that's going on. The Afrobeat groups, I'm not saying Afrobeats, Afrobeat groups in Chile, in Argentina, and other countries. I've seen them in Cuba, and I've seen them in the United States. I've visited some of them. This name, Against the Bullet, what's it called? Like Latin American name. And then, of course, the Chicago Afrobeat Project, CAPP, in the Chicago area. I visit them now and again when they're playing. So it's moving, it's growing, and all that. And we're glad that in Nigeria, there are people still continuing the spirit of Afrobeat. It may not become as popular, but it will stay a lot longer. That's the story. You leave it, you go, and you have to return to it. And it has given in a way back to Afrobeats. That may go or whatever, call it Amapiano, whatever, you sample from this, you take from this, it will be the defining, because it's about aspiration of Africa, of an imagined future Africa, and except you are subscribing to Afrofine, solving your problem in a techno-solutionist manner, like Mr. Elon Musk is saying, except you are self-negating of the total annihilation of your own persona as a species, then Afrobeat will still be relevant. So I have a sense of a future of Afrobeat informing and defining and shaping the future of the continent.
You wrote about a universal man.
Well, it turns out so.
And that you have used your work to intensify the universalization of Fela Anikulapo-Kuti.
Well, they'll say, Alhamdulillah, wa? We thank God, wa? Yeah, I'm glad I did it, though. I'm glad I did it, though.
Thank you for doing it. But before we go, Anikulapo-Kuti, he was talking about debt. Was he able to control debt?
Oh, sure. That's why he's still not dead. I mean, can't you see?
Is he not dead?
But we're discussing him.
But we discussed dead people.
No, what has happened, he's changed his state and became an idea. So that's why he's not dead, The book will survive is in the air, So it's in the ether. And the spirit of those ideals is what will guide those who subscribe to the possibility of change on the continent. By then, it wouldn't matter whether I was doing marijuana. By then, it wouldn't matter whether I was doing 27 wives. Those become distraction. He says this continent ought to be free. The extractive industries have to be manned by Africans. Those are the core messages. Let's leave all those distractive things that people want us to be saying. In any case, Fela never came out in his underwear. I hear people say nonsense like that. Yeah, there are photographs of him in his house, but he never wore boxers on stage. Never, not once. So those kinds of things. So, and this is not a geography prison. Of course, Fela had a lot of limitations. I mean, I think he could even have performed or done a lot more if he didn't distract himself with A or B or C. But those are not the issues. The core message is liberatory for this continent, and a continent in which we too readily understand deserves to be liberated from the clutches of foreign capital and internal oppressors.
Having listened to you discuss Fela, the rituals, Professor Olorunyomi, do you have a God? Where's your God? Do you believe in God?
I do. Olodumare.
Where is he or she?
Well, no one knows. But there are universal principles of God. Thou shalt not kill another person. You don't want to do the generally negative things. I don't think it's even very helpful to say there is no God. Because you can't prove there is no God. Well, you could then dare say maybe you can't prove that there is God. But if you feel the God essence, then that's okay. But it really doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not. What does matter is what borders on our intersubjective agreement as a nation, as a people, a broad sense of the goodness of man to man and the rest of it. My experience has been people who shout God and God and God, and carry religious totems and symbols all over. Now, I'm not saying all of them. I find that they have so much bitterness in their hearts. They seek so much revenge. And sometimes I say, did you hear of a man called Christ? And because for me, you may call it eclecticism, because I'm fascinated by the idea of Christ. Extremely so. Extremely so. I thought he was a revolutionary. I thought he was betrayed, by a set of upwardly mobile, scholars seeking to ingratiate themselves to the big power of Rome and serve as middle benefit captors. So then they instigated the masses to kill him. He shifted paradigm, and that's a great one. That's a figure to relate to. I mean, that's not anything that conflicts with your own, belief in Olodumare or your sense of maybe some kind of higher calling or ideals. You don't need to get to describing it. Does it have a nose or a face? And hey, man, you are just playing politics with that, and or you use a he or a she or whatever. It doesn't, because you are not truthful. It's not, you say you've seen God. I think that's just, with all due respect, that's ambitious and sometimes slightly dishonest, in my opinion. But the point is, if we subscribe to broad goodness of mankind, I think we are good and home and then the religious constitution should stop saying Nigeria is a religious control. I mean, the 79 constitution under Bala Usman and Shegun Oshoba came up with a minority report that it's not just freedom of religion, also the freedom of irreligion must be enshrined in the constitution, because it's clear to us now that there's too much manipulation of religion, and it gets stronger when the state abandons its duty and the need to chloroform the minds of people, as a strategy of dominating them. Those should be the least of their worries.
Professor Sola Olorunyomi, thank you for featuring on State Affairs.
It's a great honor to be here, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I like to thank the audience, the future audience, and the crew. Great men in the studio. Yeah,
thank you.
My great honor.
Thank you.